Bats didn't need the recent association with the coronavirus to make them creatures that people fear and even despise. They've long been viewed that way by mythology, by popular culture in many parts of the world. But is any of that justified for this remarkable mammal? Let's bypass superstition and instead find out from two leading experts on bats. In Colorado Springs, Colorado, Nancy Simmons, curator in charge, Department of Mammalogy at the American Museum of Natural History. And here in the Ontario capital, Burton Lim, assistant curator of mammalogy, Department of Natural History at the Royal Ontario Museum. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I shared before we started taping, I am one of those people that's kind of antsy about bats, but I'm looking forward to learning more about them from you. I wanted to get an idea of what drew you to study bats. Burton, I'll start with you.
Well, it wasn't until my undergraduate studies at the University of Toronto. So I took a course, a mammal course, that was given by the professor that was also the curator at the Royal Ontario Museum. So basically, his main research interest was bats, so I just followed in his footsteps.
And Nancy, how about you?
I started studying bats just because I thought they were really interesting. My background was originally in paleontology and biology, and I was looking for some new research projects after I graduated with my PhD, and I thought bats were just so cool and so diverse that it was a wonderful opportunity to address a lot of interesting evolutionary questions. And I never expected to spend the rest of my life studying bats, but that's how it's turned out.
Well, that's great. It's great to have a passion and to help us understand maybe where our biases lie. We've got some fun facts about bats. There are 1,400 species of bats. Only 3 are vampire bats that drink blood. Bats are the only mammal capable of true flight. The world's smallest bat is the bumblebee bat. It measures up to 29 to 33 millimeters in length and weighs just 2 grams when full grown. The giant golden crowned flying fox bat is the largest, with a wingspan up to 1.8 meters. And the fastest bat is the Mexican free-tailed bat that can fly in short bursts at up to 160 kilometers per hour. Bats are among the slowest reproducing mammals, with most only giving birth to 1 pup per year. And for any tequila lovers out there, bats are their primary pollinators in the wild of the agave plant, which it's made from. Burton, what is the evolutionary history of bats in a nutshell?
Well, the evolutionary history of bats goes back way back to 52 million years ago. So those are the oldest known fossils found from 2 sites in the US and Germany, but they're related to a bigger group of mammals that evolved essentially in the northern hemisphere. So they're related to diverse mammals such as shrews, pangolins, carnivores, and hoofed animals like horses and cows.
Well, you know, in the fact sheet that I had, because I think for a lot of us, where we get our perceptions of bats is from popular culture, movies, Dracula, and in the factoids that I just had, I mentioned that three bats actually drink blood. Nancy, is it fair to say that bats have been vilified throughout history?
Well, I think it's true in some parts of the world and in some cultures that bats have been vilified, but in other parts of the world, bats are considered good luck. For instance, in China, you'll find teacups and rice bowls with beautiful little bats around the edges because bats have been thought to be good luck. However, in North America, a lot of the world for Western culture has considered bats to be mysterious and scary throughout history. And partly I think that's because we don't see them very often. They're active at night. Birds, we see birds flying around during the day, and if something swoops close to us, we go, oh, it's a bird, and then we can see it land and go, oh, that's not a scary thing. At night, if you see a bat or you feel something fly near you, you go, ooh, what's that? It's scary, it's gonna get me, it's awful. And this is just a misperception of the animal that's based on the fact that they're active at night when we can't see them.
Do you also think, I hate to think of us as superficial, but do you also think it has to do with the way that they look?
Well, I think if you look closely at many photographs of bats, they're actually lovely animals. They're mammals, so like a kitten or a puppy, they have fur, they have eyes. If you hold one in your hand, their hearts beat really fast, just like if you're holding a little puppy that's nervous. They're gorgeous animals. The perception that they're ugly, I think, is very misplaced.
Well, with the coronavirus and people becoming more fearful of bats, Burton, why are so many epidemics and pandemics, including COVID-19, traced back to bats?
Bats have been implicated in being related to the current coronavirus pandemic, but there have been studies that have shown that bats aren't that unusual. So they're no different from say other mammals or birds. That they don't have more viruses than others. There are a lot of species of bats, which means that there's a greater chance there might be more viruses. But based on the fact that bats are the second most species-rich group of mammals, they don't have that many more viruses than other mammals or animals.
Do they have any characteristics that make them good vessels for carrying diseases?
What's interesting is that they do have these viruses, but a lot of times they're asymptomatic, so they seem quite healthy. So that's one of the questions that scientists are trying to figure out. Is why are bats healthy when they have all these viruses, but when they're past the humans, they're actually deadly or fatal. So that's one of the things that a lot of scientists want to find out is why bats are asymptomatic with a lot of these viruses.
Can we as humans get viruses directly from bats?
In general, yes. So viruses can pass from bats to humans, but humans can get viruses from a lot of other animals like pigs or birds. For the current COVID-19 pandemic, is that the bats probably pass it on to some intermediate host. So people think it might be a pangolin, but the differences between the bat coronavirus and the current COVID-19 virus, they're actually quite different. So they probably evolved about 60 years ago. So the question is, what was the host of it before it was passed to humans, from bats to humans? There was something else before that, because they're different enough that they evolved 60 years ago.
And do you think that the onus is on us to learn more about them instead of making conclusions that might be unfair?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think a lot of people, they sort of jump to conclusions because they want to, figure out what's going on. But I think a lot of times they do it a little bit prematurely before all the evidence is in. So I think that there still needs a little bit more study, and there are a lot of different labs that are working on the issue right now. So hopefully we'll have a better idea of where these coronaviruses have come from.
And something else that's interesting about bats, Nancy, is that they have one of the lowest reproductive rates among mammals, especially for such small animals. Why is that?
Well, that's just one of the ways in which bats evolved. So bats are interesting because we think of small mammals like mice and rats and things like that. Often they have litters, and so a single reproductive bout, the mother may have, a dozen offspring, and this may happen every few months for something like small rodents. Bats, on the other hand, give birth to usually only one young at a time, and the baby grows to a very large size before it's born. So, for instance, up to 30% the size of the mother's, or body weight of the mother, which would be like me giving birth to a 40 or 50 pound baby, which is just an astonishing thing to think about. Anyway, so bats give birth to a very large baby, but that baby then has to be able to hang on to the mother or into the roost to survive. And so part of the reason that they're probably quite large when they're born is so that they can survive effectively.
I think when people are scared, especially right now, as we live through this pandemic, you're trying to find answers, and if we get the wrong information, one of the things that I've heard people say is, why don't you just get rid of bats if they do carry disease? And Burton, why are bats so essential to our ecosystem?
Well, they do a lot of good things. So in Canada, all 18 species of bats are insect-feeding bats. So they eat things like insects that might, cause damage to agricultural crops. So there might be some, economic, benefit attached to bats and their ecosystem services. In tropical places, bats are very good seed dispersers. So again, good for reforestation. As you mentioned, the agave plant, but bats also pollinate a lot of other flowers. So basically, they help the forest naturally regenerate. So they do a lot of these, what we call free ecosystem services that are beneficial for people.
And Nancy, why is it important for us to keep in mind that that's not a solution when these things do happen, like with the coronavirus, as to eliminating a species?
Well, if we push species to extinction, they're gone forever. And as Burton pointed out, bats play critical roles in ecosystems around the world. They perform all sorts of functions that are critical to people, pest management for agriculture, and so on. There are many threats to bats these days. Habitat destruction is probably the top one as we convert forests and natural ecosystems to cities and farms and things like that. Bats are persecuted and hunted in various places around the world. Hunting, people eat bats in parts of the world, of course, but in other places they hunt bats because they're afraid that they're going to damage their fruit crops. Bats are at risk from their own diseases. There's a critical problem with a disease called white nose syndrome in North America, which is a fungus which kills bats while they're hibernating. And this fungus was actually brought to North American bats by people. So people have transported the fungus from Europe, where the bats had evolved natural resistance to it, to North America, where it's killed millions of bats. Wind farms kill bats. Bats are, for some reason, while they're flying, migrating, can be attracted to towers where the big turbines are moving, and they're killed by the turbines. So, and climate change, which is devastating ecosystems around the world. So all of these factors put bat species at risk. And if we lose these species, they're gone for good, and that can have huge cascading effects through ecosystems around the world.
I think what you just said, for me, that's lots of interesting things that you just said, but something that stood out for me is that, when we talk about vilified beasts, we think that they're harming us. But when you said that people can actually transfer viruses to bats, I don't know, I've never heard of that.
So there are many wildlife diseases that have been that humans have played a role in. Sometimes this is because we bring domestic animals into contact with wildlife, and so we transfer a disease from cattle, say, to wild deer and things like that. In this case, it's a fungus that was brought into caves, probably by some sort of caving activity, and was then transferred to the bats and is killing millions of bats. And these are the bats which in North America provide a lot of services for insect pest control. So they're the ones that are eating the mosquitoes in the night sky, but they're also the ones that are eating crop pests. And so if these bats go extinct, it means that farmers are going to have to pay more money for more chemical alternatives to control their insect pests. So bats do a lot of good for us, and many people seem to overlook that, or they just don't understand it.
And when we talk about conservation, do you think that enough is being done to protect them?
No. If we look at the number of species of bats in the world, there's over 1,400 of them, and over 200 of those species are considered vulnerable or endangered. And over 20 of them are critically endangered, which means they might go extinct this year or next year. And in fact, 8 species of bats have gone extinct in my lifetime. So we need to spend more efforts on protecting bats, and particularly protecting the ecosystems in which they live. And this also has big implications for us as people, because it is human activities that brought COVID-19 to us, which is most likely putting people in contact with wildlife in ways that they weren't before. And so conservation efforts which help keep people and wildlife separate, including keeping people and bats separate, will potentially be critical to preventing more spillover of disease from bats and from other wildlife into humans as time passes.
Burton, where are bats most numerous and diverse?
Well, most of the 1,400 species of bats are usually found in tropical areas. So in Canada, there's only 18 species, but I've done field work in Guyana and northern South America. So that country can sort of fit into sort of southwestern Ontario, but it has like 125, species of bats. So bats are similar to other organisms. So most animals, a lot of plants, as you get closer to the equator, the species diversity explodes. But as you go further away from the equator towards the poles, then the species diversity drops off. So basically, wherever you find trees in northern Canada, you'll find bats. So when you get into like the Arctic, the tundra, you won't find bats.
Maybe that's where I will move. No, I'm kidding. When we talk about the diversity of bats, what areas have the most species of bats? Burton.
Well, again, the tropical areas. So the bats, they can stay active year round. So again, in Canada, in the wintertime, the bats either hibernate or they migrate further south. So they can't always keep active in the sort of the northern or the southern extremes of the world. So the tropical areas, it allows the bats to be active. So there's food available year-round, whether it's fruit or pollen or insect or nectar. So in tropical areas, that's where you find the most species of bats.
And Nancy, I know for a lot of us, I'm sure people watching, their ears probably perked up when I did say that there are bats that drink blood. What exactly are vampire bats?
Well, there's 3 species of vampire bats. None of them are large. So they are, perhaps 10 millimeters in length, and they have a wingspan of about 10 centimeters, a wingspan of about 20 centimeters. They live in the tropical portions of America, so from northern Mexico down to Argentina. They evolved to drink mammal and bird blood, and so what they do is they fly around looking for a sleeping mammal or a sleeping bird and creep up on it. They have very sharp blade-like front teeth, and they'll make a little cut that's sort of like a paper cut, very, very small and precise, and then they'll lap up the blood. And so these 3 species of bats, they feed exclusively on blood. So this is true, but they're not large. They don't come swooping in out of the night and carry you away or anything like that.
I mean, we laugh, but I think that's the image that we've been given about bats. And when we speak about I guess we're always talking about brands of different things. Do you think that maybe scientists need to rebrand the image of the bat to help conservation more sustainable? Nancy?
Oh, well, we've definitely been trying to do that for a long time. So there are children's books, Stella Luna, about beautiful fruit bats that have, big eyes and are lovely animals. There are many very attractive bats, and there are bats that feed exclusively on fruit. There are bats that feed exclusively from flowers that have a long nose and a long tongue that they can dip into the flower to drink the nectar. So we just need to educate people more about the diversity of bats so that instead of dwelling on the things that sound scary and awful, that they think about what's really out there, which is this marvelous biological diversity and these really very attractive animals.
And another really great bat is the Hoary bat. Burton, can you tell us more about that?
Well, the Hoary bat is found in Canada and the U.S. It's found in the Americas, both North and South America. But it's one of the migratory species. So it spends the summer in Canada, and then they'll fly south, either to the U.S. and sometimes actually to Mexico. So they actually, travel, long distances every year. So maybe not the extremes that you would see with birds from the Arctic down to the southern tip of South America, but the Hoary bat has also made its way to the Galapagos Islands off of the coast of Ecuador. But Hoary bats have also flown to Hawaii, So there are fossil records of the hoary bat in Hawaii before humans got there. So, so the bats had to have flown there. So that's just an example of, how great flyers these bats are.
And that's the thing that makes them special too, that they can fly, right?
Yeah, so bats are the only mammals that fly. So that's, one of the unique things that has made them adapt, to living at night. So basically, they're the nighttime equivalent of what birds do in the daytime.
So let's talk about myths. Did you actually, I don't know if you both caught it, but I actually said another fascinating bat is Hoary. So I think I'm on your side now about bats. I think they're really interesting. So let's talk about myths that we need to bust for people to understand the beauty of bats and the diversity of bats. So Nancy, I'll start with you. What do you think are some of the myths that we need to bust about bats moving forward?
Well, I think one of the classics is that bats want to fly into your hair. Bats do not want to fly into your hair. But if a bat flies near you in the evening, it has an extraordinary ability to sense where it is using echolocation, which is beaming sound, high frequency sounds that it produces in the throat out through the mouth. And so it can tell exactly where it is with respect to you and your hair. And it may be investigating insects flying over your head. It may be eating that mosquito that was coming to get you, but it's not trying to get into your hair.
You know what I got in mind? Because I don't know if you've noticed my hair. I'm just trying to think of like a bat around my hair.
I started to say that. I was looking at your hair going, definitely does not want to. Yeah. Well, that's one of the myths you always hear is that bats want to fly into your hair, and it's just not true. Another one is that bats are blind. Bats are not blind. Bats actually have quite good vision. It's just vision adapted for very low light situations. Some bats, which are the flying foxes in the old world, are fruit-eating bats which do not use echolocation. They actually use vision to get around, and so they have quite large eyes and very good color vision, just like primates do, in fact.
And Burton, what about you? What are some myths that are important to bust about bats?
Well, we sort of discussed some of them already. So a lot of people, think, bats are bad or, they're vampire bats. But as Nancy mentioned, they're only found in sort of the tropical places of Central and South America. So in Canada, we don't have to worry about, vampire bats, coming after us, after our blood or anything. So again, they're all just insect-feeding bats. So just sort of the bad, sort of myths or folklore that go along with bats. So again, they're beneficial. They provide a lot of ecosystem services. So they actually do good for the environment.
Mm-hmm. And I know I'm going to kill this word, so you can correct me. But what do you love most about your jobs as chiropterologists? Let me try again. Chiropterologists. Is that right?
Bat researcher.
Bat researcher.
Better. Yeah, bat researcher.
Why did you just say the word? What do you love most about the job that you do and what it's called?
Well, so I don't consider myself a chiropterologist. I can't say it either. I consider myself first a museum curator. So I look after museum collections and I do biological research. I'm an evolutionary biologist. I'm interested in the evolution of diversity and diversity of bats. And I guess what I love most about my job is that I get to ask interesting biological questions and then go out there and answer them. And I love doing field work, and that's really my favorite part of my job is being in the field.
And you've never been afraid of a bat in the field, if out of the blue?
Oh, no. I'm much more afraid of people in the field. If you're out in the forest at night catching bats, the last thing you want to have is, people you don't know approaching through the darkness in the night. That's much scarier than a bat by far to me.
And Burton, what about you? What do you love the most about your job?
Well, I'm like Nancy. I love the field work that I do. So I think I've been to over 30, countries and counting, doing work on bats and mammals in general. But it's also, sort of discovering, something new, whether it's a new species or going to a place that's never been explored. So that's one of the aspects I love is sort of the research and the field work and traveling.
You know, the one thing I think as we get older, we are exposed to so many things, but my children love bats. They love all types of animals and creatures, and I've been trying to be very careful about not getting like scared if I see something. Do you think that us grown-ups should rediscover the curiosity that we had as children, especially when it comes to the species of bats? Nancy?
Oh, absolutely. I think the more that you learn, the more intrigued you'll become. There's so many interesting things about bats that people just don't know. And I think that if people knew more about them, they would be much more open to the sorts of efforts we're making for bat conservation worldwide. And I think also they would just enjoy it because bats are fascinating animals. There's so many wonderful, neat things that they do, and learning about them is just exciting.
And Burton, I'll let you have the last word.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, I think part of the problem is that people just don't see bats, so when they don't know about something, and then they start making things up. So I think one thing is to try to get to know the wildlife. So for bats, one thing that's sort of becoming fairly popular now is you can buy like literally a microphone that you can plug in your smartphone. And you can hear the ultrasonic sounds that we can't normally hear without a device. So people can actually, monitor and hear bats, flying around at night, even though they may not be able to see them. So I think that's, one way to sort of discover and learn about, wildlife that you don't know too much about.
Burton and Nancy, thank you so much. It's been such a fun half hour chatting to you about bats. And my mind has been completely changed. And I apologize for all of my preconceived notions about bats. Thank you so much. We appreciate your insight.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.